The winter wind howled through the pines like a living thing, angry and relentless. Aria pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders as she moved through her small cabin, lighting the last oil lamp against the encroaching darkness. The glass rattled in its frame with each gust, and snow had begun to pile against the windows in thick, crystalline drifts. She'd lived alone in this cabin for 3 years now, ever since the accident that had taken her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died. The isolation had been a choice at first, a way to escape the pitying looks and whispered conversations in town. But somewhere along the way, solitude had transformed from refuge into prison, and Aria wasn't entirely sure how to find her way back. Not that it mattered tonight. The storm had been building since noon, and by the look of those clouds, she'd be snowed in for at least 2 days. She'd prepared well enough, firewood stacked high, dried meat and vegetables in the cellar, her medicinal herbs hanging in neat bundles from the rafters. The cabin smelled of sage and lavender, wood smoke and something else, something earthy and ancient that seemed to seep from the very walls. The shadow forest loomed just beyond her eastern window, a dark mass of towering trees that the locals avoided after sunset. Stories circulated in town about that forest. Disappearances, strange lights, howls that sounded almost human. Aria had heard them all. Her grandmother had told her different stories, older ones, about a time when the boundary between the human world and something else had been more permeable. Respect the forest, her grandmother had always said, her weathered hands sorting through healing plants. But don't fear it. Fear makes you prey. Aria was stirring a pot of vegetable soup when she heard it, a sound that cut through the wind's fury, scratching, deliberate and desperate, coming from her front door. She froze, ladle halfway to her lips. The scratching came again, accompanied by a low, plaintive whine. An animal, something seeking shelter from the storm. Common sense told her to ignore it. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Never open your door to what you can't see clearly. Not here. Not this close to the shadow forest. But there was something in that sound, a vulnerability that spoke to the healer in her, the part of her soul that had chosen this isolated life specifically so she could help the creatures that wandered too close to human settlements. She'd treated injured deer, mended the wing of a hawk, even nursed a fox back to health after it had been caught in a trap. This was different, though. She could feel it in her bones. The scratching became more frantic. "Damn it," Aria muttered, setting down the ladle. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing, and approached the door. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted the wooden latch. The door flew inward with the force of the wind, and Aria stumbled back, raising the poker defensively. Snow swirled into her home, and there, on her threshold, were 2 wolves. Not ordinary wolves. These were massive, even for their kind, with thick fur matted with ice and snow. One was dark gray, almost black in the lamplight, with eyes that gleamed an unusual amber. The other was smaller, silvery white, with one paw held awkwardly off the ground. They should have lunged. Wolves didn't approach human dwellings. Wolves didn't scratch politely at doors. But these 2 simply stood there, sides heaving with exhaustion, breath misting in the frigid air. The larger one's eyes met hers, and Aria felt a jolt of recognition she couldn't explain. There was intelligence in that gaze. Too much intelligence. "Jesus," she breathed, lowering the poker slightly. The white wolf whimpered, and Aria saw blood on its injured paw, freezing in dark rivulets against the snow. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door, to protect herself. Wolves were predators. Dangerous. Unpredictable. But she'd seen starvation before. She recognized desperation, and something else. Something in the way they watched her, waiting, as if they understood that their fate rested in her hands. "You're going to get us both killed," she told them, though she wasn't sure if she meant herself or the wolves. She stepped aside. The larger wolf moved first, limping into the cabin with a dignity that seemed almost regal despite its bedraggled state. The smaller one followed, barely putting weight on its injured paw. Once inside, they both shook themselves, sending snow and ice flying across Aria's carefully cleaned floor. She closed the door against the storm, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. For a long moment, human and wolves simply stared at each other. The fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, the wind screamed its fury at being denied entry. "Okay," Aria said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Okay, you're here. Now what?" The dark wolf tilted its head, an eerily human gesture. Then it moved slowly toward the fireplace, settling itself on the worn rug with a heavy sigh. The white wolf tried to follow but stumbled, a small yelp of pain escaping its muzzle. Without thinking, Aria moved forward. "Let me see that paw." She knelt beside the white wolf, half expecting teeth to sink into her flesh. Instead, the creature remained perfectly still as she gently lifted its injured leg. Up close, she could see it was younger than the dark one, barely more than a juvenile, and the injury was worse than she'd thought. A deep cut across the paw pad, likely from ice or sharp rock, already showing signs of infection. "This is going to hurt," she warned, meeting those strange, too intelligent eyes. The wolf made a sound that was almost like understanding. Aria worked quickly, retrieving her medicine kit and a bowl of warm water. She cleaned the wound carefully, noting how the young wolf barely flinched despite what must have been considerable pain. The dark wolf watched from its position by the fire, never taking its eyes off her. "You're not normal wolves, are you?" she murmured, as she applied a poultice of yarrow and golden seal to prevent infection. No normal wolf would sit this calmly while a human touched them. Neither wolf responded, of course, but Aria swore she saw something flicker in the dark one's amber eyes. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or amusement. She wrapped the white wolf's paw in clean cloth, tying it securely but not too tight. "There, keep it clean and dry and it should heal in—" She stopped herself with a self-deprecating laugh. "Listen to me, giving medical advice to wolves." Standing, she returned to her soup pot, suddenly aware of how hungry the animals must be. When was the last time they'd eaten? They were both too thin beneath their thick fur, ribs showing in places they shouldn't. Aria ladled soup into 2 wooden bowls, then pulled down what remained of her dried venison from the larder. It wasn't much. She'd been planning to make it last another week, but looking at those starving creatures, she couldn't bring herself to hold back. She set the bowls on the floor, along with the meat. "It's not what you're used to hunting, I'm sure, but it's warm and it's food." The wolves didn't lunge. Instead, the dark one looked at her, then deliberately dipped its head in what could only be described as a nod of thanks before beginning to eat with surprising delicacy. The white one followed suit, eating slowly despite its obvious hunger. Aria settled into her grandmother's old rocking chair, her own bowl of soup growing cold in her hands as she watched her unexpected guests. The surreality of the situation hadn't escaped her. She was sharing her home with 2 massive wolves during a snowstorm, and instead of fearing for her life, she felt calm, almost peaceful. The fire painted dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a strange tranquility had settled over the small space. The wolves finished their meal and curled up together near the hearth, the white one tucking itself against the dark one's larger body. Aria should have been terrified. She should have locked herself in her bedroom, poker in hand, waiting for dawn. Instead, she found herself pulling a quilt from her bed and draping it over the wolves. They stirred, the dark one opening one eye to regard her with that unsettling intelligence. "Don't get used to this," she told them softly. "When the storm breaks, you need to go back to wherever you came from, back to the shadow forest or wherever wolves like you belong." The dark wolf's eye closed again, but not before Aria caught something in its expression. Sadness, maybe, or resignation. She returned to her chair, meaning to keep watch, to stay alert, but exhaustion from the day's chores and the warmth of the fire pulled at her eyelids. Her head nodded once, twice. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was the dark wolf rising, moving closer to her chair, and settling itself at her feet like a guardian. "Protect," something whispered in the back of her mind. "It wants to protect you." But that was ridiculous. Wolves didn't protect humans, did they? Aria woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind that peculiar quiet that follows heavy snowfall, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the frost-etched windows, painting everything in shades of silver and gold. She was in her bed, though she had no memory of getting there. The quilt she'd draped over the wolves was now covering her. On her bedside table sat a wooden cup of water that hadn't been there the night before. Heart-pounding, Aria stumbled out of bed and into the main room. The wolves were gone. The bowls were clean, stacked neatly by her washing basin. The fire had been built up, fresh logs arranged with a skill that spoke of human hands, not paws. And on her table, arranged in a careful pattern, were 3 pine cones, the traditional forest sign of gratitude. "What the hell?" Aria whispered. Then she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, many footsteps, crunching through the snow outside, getting closer. Aria moved to the window and looked out. Her cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. The snow lay pristine and untouched in the early morning light, except for the path leading from the shadow forest. And down that path came an army. There was no other word for it. Warriors in dark leather and fur, moving with predatory grace through the snow. She counted 10, 20, 50, no, more. They kept coming, emerging from the tree line like shadows given form, at least 150 of them. And at their head walked a man who made Aria's breath catch in her throat. Even from a distance, she could sense his power, the way the others deferred to him, how he moved with absolute confidence and authority. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught the morning light, he wore a cloak of black fur that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up directly at her window. His eyes, even from this distance, gleamed the exact same shade of amber as the dark wolf that had slept at her feet. Aria's hand flew to her mouth, understanding crashing over her like a physical blow. Not wolves. They hadn't been wolves at all. The man, the king, because that's what he had to be, raised one hand. The army stopped as one, a unified display of discipline that was terrifying in its precision. Then he began walking alone toward her cabin door. Aria stumbled back from the window, her mind reeling. Lycanthropes. The stories were true. They were all true. And she'd just sheltered 2 of them, fed them, tended their wounds. A knock on the door. 3 measured strikes, neither threatening nor gentle. "Open the door, human," a deep voice commanded. It wasn't a request. "We know you're in there. We've come for what's ours." Aria's hands shook as she crossed to the door. There was no running, nowhere to hide. Whatever was about to happen, she'd brought it on herself the moment she'd shown mercy to 2 starving creatures in a storm. She lifted the latch with trembling fingers and pulled the door open. The Lycanthrope King stood on her threshold, and up close, he was even more overwhelming. At least 6.5 feet tall, with features that were too perfect to be entirely human. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those eyes, those impossible amber eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "You sheltered them," he said. Not a question, an accusation. Aria lifted her chin, refusing to cower despite the fear coursing through her veins. "They were hurt, starving. I did what anyone with a conscience would do. Anyone with a conscience would have closed the door. Then I suppose I'm not like most people." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. He studied her for a long moment, and Aria felt exposed under that scrutiny, as if he were cataloging every scar, every secret, every fear she'd ever held. "What's your name, healer? How did you—" She stopped. Of course he knew. The herbs, the medicine kit still sitting out from last night. Aria. Aria Thornwood. Thornwood. He tested the name, his brow furrowing slightly. That name means something. Something old. Before Aria could respond, 2 figures pushed through the crowd of warriors. A teenage boy and girl, both wrapped in furs too large for their frames. The girl had silver blonde hair and walked with a slight limp. The boy's hair was dark as midnight. The wolves, in human form. "She saved us, my lord," the girl said, her voice small but steady. "Kale and I would have died in the storm. She gave us food, shelter, medicine. She was kind." The king's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in his stance. He looked back at Aria, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes, suspicion battling against something else. Humans near the Shadow Forest are never here by accident, he said quietly, dangerously. They're here to hunt, to trap, to collect bounties on creatures they don't understand and fear they can't control. I'm here because I have nowhere else to go, Aria shot back, anger replacing fear. I'm here because my grandmother left me this cabin, and because I've never fit in anywhere else. I don't hunt. I don't trap. I heal. That's all I've ever done. Pretty words. The truth. They stared at each other, the tension so thick Aria could taste it. Behind the king, the army waited, silent and watchful. One word from him, and she'd be dead before she could scream. Instead, he did something unexpected. He leaned closer, close enough that Aria could smell pine and snow and something wild on his skin. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for her ears. There are herbs growing beside your cabin that shouldn't exist in human territory. Your scent is unusual, different. And my warriors tell me they felt old magic around this place last night. His eyes searched hers. Who are you really? Aria Thornwood. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. Not roughly, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. Where his skin touched hers, Aria felt a jolt like lightning, warm and electric and utterly foreign. His eyes widened fractionally, telling her he felt it too. Whatever you are, you're not just human. Not entirely. You're insane. You're coming with us, he interrupted, releasing her wrist and stepping back. Until I can determine whether you're a threat to my people, you'll remain in our territory. Consider it protective custody. You can't just kidnap me. I'm a king. I can do whatever is necessary to protect my pack. He gestured to two warriors, who stepped forward immediately. Gather her things. We leave in 10 minutes. Wait. No. You can't. But the king had already turned away, his attention on his warriors, issuing commands in a language that sounded like growling and wind through trees. The teenage girl, the white wolf, approached Aria hesitantly. I'm sorry, she whispered. But my lord is right. There's something different about you. We all felt it last night. You're not like other humans. And if the rival packs find out you helped us? She shook her head. This is the safest place for you now. Whether you believe it or not. Aria watched as strangers moved through her home, her sanctuary, packing her belongings with an efficiency that spoke of practice. The king stood in her doorway, silhouetted against the bright snow, every inch the monarch his title proclaimed. And despite everything, the fear, the anger, the absolute insanity of the situation, Aria couldn't deny the truth she'd felt the moment his skin touched hers. Her quiet life was over. Whatever came next would change everything. The king glanced back at her one more time, and in his amber eyes, she saw her fate written clear as daylight. She was about to enter a world she'd never imagined existed, and there would be no going back. The warriors moved through Aria's cabin like a choreographed dance, silent, efficient, terrifyingly coordinated. Two of them, a woman with scarred hands and a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, began carefully packing her herbs and medical supplies. They handled the delicate dried plants with a reverence that surprised her, as if they understood the value of each root and leaf. Aria stood frozen in the center of her home, watching her entire life being systematically dismantled and packed into leather satchels. The surreality of the moment threatened to overwhelm her. Just yesterday, her biggest concern had been whether she had enough firewood to last the winter. Now she was being abducted by a Lycanthrope King and his army. The king himself stood just outside her door, speaking in low tones with a massive man whose face bore 3 parallel scars from temple to jaw. Even without hearing the words, Aria could sense the military precision in their exchange. This was a leader consulting with his general, making strategic decisions about a situation neither of them fully understood. Miss Thornwood? The soft voice belonged to the silver-haired girl, the white wolf from last night. Up close and in human form, she looked about 16, with delicate features and eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone so young. I'm Lyra, and this is my brother, Kyle. The dark-haired boy nodded curtly, his amber eyes, so like the king's, watching Aria with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. We didn't mean to bring trouble to your door. You were dying, Aria said quietly, finding her voice at last. I couldn't just leave you out there. Most humans would have, Kale replied. Most have. There was a story there. A painful one. But before Aria could ask, the king's voice cut through the cabin's subdued activity. Enough. We're leaving. Bye! He filled the doorway as he re-entered, and Aria was struck again by the sheer presence of him. It wasn't just his size, though he was easily the largest man she'd ever seen. It was the way he carried himself, the absolute certainty of someone who had never once doubted his right to command. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Their eyes met, and Aria felt that same electric jolt from before, as if the air between them had become charged with invisible lightning. I need to close up the cabin properly, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. Bank the fire, secure the shutters, unless you want it to burn down or be looted while I'm gone. The king studied her for a long moment. You speak as if you're planning to return. I am. This is my home. That remains to be seen. He gestured to the scarred man who'd been standing outside. Matthias, give her 5 minutes. Supervised. The general, Matthias, nodded and positioned himself by the door, arms crossed over his massive chest. The king turned to leave, then paused, his hand on the door frame. Don't try to run, he said without looking back. You wouldn't make it 10 feet into the snow, and I'd prefer not to have to chase you. It would be undignified for both of us. Then he was gone, his dark cloak swirling behind him like smoke. Aria released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Under Matthias's watchful gaze, she moved mechanically through the tasks she'd performed hundreds of times, scattering the fire coals, checking that the food stores were properly sealed, latching the shutters from the inside. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled on her warmest cloak, the heavy wool one her grandmother had woven years ago. He's not as cruel as he seems, Matthias said suddenly, his voice a deep rumble. The king. He's harsh, because he has to be. Because being soft gets people killed. Aria looked up at the enormous man. And am I in danger of being killed? That depends entirely on what you are and why you're really here. I've told you. I know what you've told us. Matthias's scarred face was impossible to read. But Lord Theron didn't become king by taking things at face value. There are forces in this world that would use a kind healer as the perfect weapon. An innocent face hiding a viper's intent. Theron, Aria repeated softly. So the king had a name. Somehow that made him seem more real, less like a figure from one of her grandmother's stories. Don't use it lightly, Matthias warned. Only those he trusts earn that right. To everyone else, he's my lord or sire or simply the king. He moved to the door, holding it open. Time's up. We need to move. The cold hit Aria like a physical blow as she stepped outside. The sun was higher now, gleaming off the fresh snow with painful brightness. And there, arrayed in a semicircle around her cabin, stood an army unlike anything she could have imagined. 150 warriors, Theron had said. Aria believed it. They stood in perfect formation, organized into what appeared to be smaller units of 10 or 12. Some were armored in leather and chainmail, weapons gleaming at their sides. Others wore simpler clothing but carried themselves with the same lethal grace. Men and women both, ranging from teenage to grizzled veterans, but all sharing that same otherworldly quality, too beautiful, too perfect, too dangerous to be entirely human. And at their center stood King Theron, elevated slightly on what appeared to be a natural rise in the terrain. The morning light caught in his dark hair, and his amber eyes swept across his assembled warriors with the focus of a born leader. We march in 10 minutes, he called out, his voice carrying effortlessly across the clearing. Standard formation. Scouts forward, healers to the center. Lyra and Kale, you'll stay with Marcus's unit until we reach the border. Yes, my lord, came the unified response, and Aria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This was a military force, disciplined and deadly, and she was about to become their prisoner. Theron's gaze found her across the snow. Miss Thornwood, you'll walk beside me where I can see you. Don't lag behind, and don't attempt conversation with my warriors without permission. Understood? It wasn't a request. Aria nodded stiffly, pride warring with pragmatism. She could refuse, could make a scene, but to what end? She was one unarmed woman facing an army of lycanthropes. Resistance would be suicide. As if reading her thoughts, Lyra appeared at her elbow. "It's not as bad as it seems," the girl whispered. "And the king, he won't hurt you. He's curious about you. That's why he wants you close. Curious people don't usually show up with an army. Curious kings do when they're protecting what they love." Before Aria could parse that cryptic statement, a horn sounded, clear and bright in the winter air. The warriors began to move, flowing into formation with the fluid precision of long practice. Matthias gestured for Aria to follow him toward the center of the formation, where Theron waited. The king watched her approach, his expression unreadable. This close, Aria could see details she'd missed before: the faint scars on his knuckles, the silver threads woven through the clasp of his cloak, the way his eyes tracked her every movement with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Keep up," was all he said before turning and beginning to walk. The army moved as one, and Aria found herself swept along in their wake. Warriors flanked her on all sides, close enough to prevent escape, but not so close as to be overtly threatening. It was a subtle cage, but a cage nonetheless. The journey toward the shadow forest began. The path through the snow was easier than Aria had expected. The warriors ahead somehow trampled the drifts into a manageable trail, and those around her blocked the worst of the wind. Still, within an hour, her legs burned from the exertion, and her lungs ached from breathing the frigid air. Theron walked ahead of her, his long stride eating up the distance with enviable ease. He never looked back, but Aria had the distinct impression he was acutely aware of her every step. Beside her, Matthias kept pace, silent but watchful. They were perhaps 2 miles from her cabin when one of the scouts, a lean woman with ash-blonde hair, came racing back through the formation. "My lord!" She dropped to one knee in the snow before Theron. "Movement to the northeast. Unknown party, at least 20 strong, heading toward the healer's cabin." Theron's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The controlled monarch became something else, something predatory and dangerous. "Did they see us?" "Uncertain, my lord. But they're moving fast." "Rival pack." This from Matthias, his hand moving to the sword at his hip. "Or human hunters," Theron replied grimly. He turned, his eyes finding Aria with unsettling speed. "Did you tell anyone you'd seen lycanthropes? Send any messages, any warnings?" "What? No! I didn't even know you existed until—" "Then we have a leak." Theron's jaw tightened. Someone knew Lyra and Kale were lost. Someone knew where they'd taken shelter. His eyes narrowed. "Or someone's been watching you, waiting for an opportunity." The implications of that statement made Aria's blood run cold. "Watching me? Why would anyone watch me?" Instead of answering, Theron strode toward her with such purpose that Aria instinctively stepped back, only to collide with Matthias's solid form. The king stopped mere inches away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer truthfully." His voice was low, dangerous. "Do you know what moonshade looks like?" "Moonshade?" Aria's brow furrowed. "The silvery flowering plant?" "Yes, my grandmother used it in healing tinctures, but it's rare. I haven't seen it in years. There's a patch of it growing beside your cabin. Fresh growth, no more than a few weeks old. That's impossible. Moonshade only grows in—" Aria stopped, the pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. "In places touched by ancient magic. My grandmother told me stories, but I thought they were just stories." "Your grandmother." Theron's eyes bored into hers. "What was her name?" "Helena. Helena Thornwood. She died 3 years ago." Something flickered across Theron's face. Recognition, perhaps, or shock. He turned to Matthias. "Did we ever determine what became of the Thornwood line? The peacekeepers?" "Lost," Matthias replied. "The records said the last of them died out nearly a century ago. No heirs, no descendants. Clearly the records were wrong." Theron looked back at Aria, and she saw a war playing out behind his eyes. Suspicion, curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Your grandmother was Helena Thornwood, born Helena Ashworth? I don't know. She never spoke about her life before my mother was born." "Because she was hiding." Theron's hand shot out, catching Aria's wrist again. That same electric sensation raced up her arm, stronger this time, almost painful in its intensity. His eyes widened fractionally. You can feel it. This connection. Tell me you feel it. Aria tried to jerk her arm away, but his grip was iron. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie. The command cracked like a whip, and several warriors nearby stiffened to attention. Theron took a visible breath, moderating his tone. I can feel your pulse racing. Sense your fear, yes, but also recognition. You feel this bond forming between us, even if you don't understand what it means. You're hurting me, Aria said quietly, and it was the truth. Not because his grip was too tight, but because the sensation of his skin against hers was overwhelming, like standing too close to a bonfire. He released her immediately, stepping back as if she'd burned him. For a moment, the mighty king looked almost vulnerable, confused by his own reaction. The tense silence was broken by another scout racing toward them. My lord, the unknown party has reached the cabin. They're searching it. I counted 23, all armed. Human, but different. They move like they've been trained to hunt our kind. Hunters, Matthias growled. The coalition must have tracked Lyra and Kyle. Or they tracked something else, Theron said, his gaze never leaving Aria. Something that's been hidden for a very long time. I don't understand any of this, Aria protested, frustration bleeding into her voice. You show up with an army, accuse me of being something I'm not, drag me away from my home, and now you're saying I'm being hunted by people I've never even heard of? This is insane. Insane or not, it's the truth. Theron gestured sharply, and the entire formation shifted, warriors moving into a defensive configuration around Aria without a single spoken command. Those hunters will torture you for information about lycanthrope movements. And when you can't tell them anything, they'll kill you, slowly, to send a message to us. What message? That humans who shelter our kind die screaming. The blunt brutality of the statement stole Aria's breath. She looked around at the warriors surrounding her, seeing them with new eyes. These weren't just soldiers. They were survivors of a war she hadn't even known was being fought. So what now? She asked quietly. Now we move. Fast. Theron turned to Matthias. Send Raven and her unit to cover our tracks. I want the hunters chasing ghosts until we're safely across the border. And if they catch our scent anyway? A cold smile crossed Theron's face, transforming him into something terrifying. Then we show them why humans fear the Shadow Forest, but not here. Not in the open where their weapons have advantage. We draw them deep, to our territory, our rules. He turned back to Aria, and the smile vanished, replaced by something more complex. This isn't how I wanted this to go. You deserve answers, explanations. But right now, your life depends on you trusting me. Can you do that? Aria wanted to say no, wanted to demand her freedom, her old life back. But looking into Theron's eyes, she saw genuine concern beneath the authority. He'd brought an army not to intimidate her, but to protect her. The realization was dizzying. I don't trust easily, she said at last. Good. That means you're intelligent. He held out his hand. But I'm asking you to try, just until we reach safety. After that, you're free to hate me all you want. Aria stared at his outstretched hand. Taking it would be an agreement, an acknowledgement that her life had irrevocably changed. But refusing it would be suicide. She understood that now. The hunters behind them, the mysterious connection to some ancient lineage she'd never known existed, the strange magic that even Theron seemed wary of. She was in over her head, drowning in currents she couldn't see. She placed her hand in his. The contact sent another shock through her system, but this time she didn't pull away. Theron's fingers closed around hers, careful, gentle, as if she were made of glass. We run, he said simply, and they did. The army moved from a march to a swift jog, then to something faster, not quite running, but a ground-eating lope that covered distance with shocking speed. Warriors in the front and rear shifted, and Aria caught glimpses of something impossible, their forms blurring, bones restructuring beneath skin, until they ran on 4 legs instead of 2. Partial transformations. They were changing without fully becoming wolves, taking on just enough animal characteristics to enhance their speed and endurance. Theron kept pace beside her, his hand never leaving hers. And somehow, impossibly, Aria found herself keeping up. Her legs should have been screaming, her lungs burning, but instead she felt energized, as if Theron's touch was channeling strength directly into her body. "Don't think about it," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the sound of pounding feet and racing heartbeats. "Just run. Your body knows what to do." That's not possible. Nothing about you is what it seems, Aria Thornwood. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." They ran for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. The landscape gradually shifted from sparse winter woods to the dense primordial forest that gave the Shadow Forest its name. Here, the trees grew so thick that snow barely touched the ground, and the light took on a greenish, underwater quality. Finally, Theron raised his free hand, and the entire company came to a stop with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Warriors fanned out, creating a perimeter, while others began unpacking supplies and tending to weapons. Aria bent over, hands on knees, trying to catch her breath. She should be exhausted, should be ready to collapse. Instead, she felt eerily energized, as if she could run for another hour without stopping. "Impossible," she muttered. "Not for someone with Thornwood blood." Theron stood beside her, not even winded. "Your ancestors were bridgewalkers, humans who could tap into the same energy that flows through lycanthropes. It made them perfect mediators, perfect healers, perfect targets. Targets for whom? Everyone. Both sides of the war wanted to control them, use them. Those who couldn't be controlled." He trailed off, but Aria could fill in the blanks. "Were eliminated." Yes. Aria straightened, looking around at the ancient forest. Everything felt different here. The air itself seemed charged with energy, making her skin tingle. "Is this your territory?" "The outer edge. We're still 2 hours from the heart of it, where the old fortress stands." Theron studied her face. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been plugged into lightning," Aria admitted. "Everything is too bright, too loud. I can hear individual heartbeats, smell the metal of weapons from 50 feet away. It's overwhelming. Your gifts are waking up. Being in lycanthrope territory, surrounded by our energy, it's catalyzing something that's been dormant your whole life." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I should have warned you, should have prepared you better, but there wasn't time." Before Aria could respond, Lyra ran up, her young face flushed with excitement. "My lord, the scouts report the hunters have lost our trail. They're circling back toward the human settlements. For now," Matthias added grimly, joining them. "But they'll be back. The coalition doesn't give up easily. Then we need answers." Theron turned to Aria. "I need to know everything your grandmother told you. Every story, every lesson, every strange thing that happened in that cabin. If you really are what I think you are, then you're not just in danger. You're a piece on a board game that's been playing out for centuries." "And what do you think I am?" Aria demanded, frustration and fear finally boiling over. "You keep implying I'm something special, something dangerous, but you won't just say it." Theron met her anger with calm certainty. "I think you're the last living Thornwood Bridgewalker. I think your grandmother hid you in that cabin, taught you healing to prepare you without revealing the truth, and died hoping you'd never have to face this world." His amber eyes blazed with intensity. "And I think the moonshade growing by your cabin wasn't an accident. It was a beacon, calling to those with the knowledge to recognize it. Your power is waking up, Aria. And everyone, hunters, rival packs, even some of my own people, will want to either use you or destroy you because of it." The weight of his words settled over Aria like a physical thing. "So what am I supposed to do?" "Survive," Theron said simply. "Learn what you are, and decide whose side you're on when the war that's been simmering for 100 years finally explodes." A commotion at the perimeter interrupted whatever Aria might have said. One of the scouts ran toward them, her face pale. "My lord, we found something. You need to see this. Now." Theron exchanged a glance with Matthias, then looked at Aria. "Stay close to me. Whatever this is, I want you where I can protect you." They followed the scout to the eastern edge of the perimeter, where several warriors had gathered around something on the ground. They parted immediately when Theron approached, revealing what had caused such concern. A symbol, carved into a tree trunk, fresh, the sap still oozing from the cuts. It showed a circle bisected by a diagonal line, with strange runes around the border. Gods, Matthias breathed. That's the Volkov mark. Marcus Volkov, Theron said, his voice gone cold. He's claiming this territory. But we've held this border for 30 years, which means he's either insane or he's found something worth starting a war over. Theron's hand went to the sword at his side. Increase the perimeter guard, double watches tonight, and send a runner to the fortress. I want a full council assembled by dawn. As the warriors scattered to obey, Theron turned to Aria. His face was harder now, the concerned man replaced by the tactical king. Change of plans. We're moving faster and traveling through the night. I need you inside the fortress walls before— He stopped mid-sentence, his entire body going rigid. His nostrils flared and his eyes shifted, the pupils elongating into something more animal. What? Aria whispered, feeling her own pulse spike in response to his reaction. What is it? Blood, Theron said quietly. Human blood. Fresh. Coming from the direction of your cabin. The implication hung in the air between them. The hunters hadn't found an empty cabin. They'd found something, or someone, else. Could be a trap, Matthias warned. Or it could be someone who needs help. Theron's jaw clenched, the internal struggle visible on his face. Raven, take your unit and investigate. Carefully. If it's a trap, fall back immediately. And if it's not, the ash-blonde scout asked, then we have a bigger problem than Marcus Volkov claiming territory. Theron looked at Aria, and she saw the question in his eyes before he asked it. If someone's injured, bleeding out, could you help them? I'm a healer, Aria said simply. That's what I do. Something shifted in Theron's expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Then we wait for Raven's report. But Aria— He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a murmur meant only for her ears. If this is what I think it is, if someone found that moonshade and tried to harvest it for themselves, you need to understand that what happens next might be brutal. My world isn't kind. It isn't gentle, and I can't protect you from all of it, no matter how much I might want to. Why would you want to protect me at all? Aria asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. You don't know me. I could be your enemy. Theron's hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. Because when I touch you, I feel something I haven't felt in 100 years. Peace. And in my world, Aria Thornwood, peace is rarer than moonshade and twice as dangerous. He dropped his hand and turned away before she could respond, barking orders to his warriors. But Aria stood frozen, her cheek still tingling where he'd touched her, trying to process what he'd just admitted. 100 years. He'd said 100 years. Just how old was the Lycanthrope King? And what did it mean that she made him feel at peace? 30 minutes later, Raven returned, her face grim. My lord, she said, kneeling in the snow. We found a body. Male, mid-30s. Human. He'd been harvesting the moonshade when something attacked him. Something? Theron's voice was sharp. Be specific. Not us, my lord. The wounds aren't lycanthrope. They're— Raven hesitated. They're wrong. Like something tried to mimic our attack patterns but didn't quite understand the mechanics. And there are tracks, large, but not wolf. More like— Like what? Matthias demanded. Like something trying to frame us for murder, Raven finished quietly. The implications rippled through the assembled warriors. Theron's face went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Show me, he said. My lord, if it's a trap, then we spring it on our terms. Matthias, full combat formation. Lyra, Kale, stay with the healers. His eyes found Aria. And you need to see this, to understand what you've walked into. They moved as a unit through the forest, every warrior alert for ambush. Aria's enhanced senses picked up things she'd never noticed before. The whisper of steel sliding against leather, the controlled breathing of soldiers ready for battle, the complex web of scents that painted a picture of the forest as vivid as sight. The body lay in a small clearing, exactly where Raven had described. And she'd been right. The wounds were wrong, too perfect, too theatrical, like someone's idea of what a lycanthrope attack should look like rather than the reality. But it was what lay beside the body that made Aria's blood run cold. A leather satchel, filled with moonshade, and carved into the tree above the corpse, another symbol, different from the Volkov mark, but equally disturbing. It showed a crescent moon dripping blood. "The Coalition," Matthias spat. "They're trying to start a war. They're trying to flush out the Bridgewalker," Theron corrected, his voice deadly calm. "They murdered one of their own, made it look like we did it, all to force Aria out of hiding." "But I wasn't hiding. I didn't even know." "They didn't know that." Theron crouched beside the body, studying it with clinical precision. "They just knew that moonshade doesn't grow randomly. It grows where Bridgewalker magic is strong. So they sent someone to investigate, probably ordered him to harvest the plants. When he succeeded, they killed him to create a martyr and a reason to declare open war on my people." He stood, his face terrible in its fury. "They're using you as bait, and now that they know you exist, they'll never stop hunting you." Aria felt the world tilting around her. 12 hours ago, she'd been alone in her cabin, worried about firewood. Now she was apparently the catalyst for a war she didn't understand between forces she hadn't known existed. "I don't want this," she whispered. "I know." Theron's voice softened fractionally. "But want doesn't matter. You are what you are. The only question now is whether you'll let me teach you to survive it." Aria looked at the dead man, at the stolen moonshade, at the army of warriors watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to something that might have been hope. She thought of her quiet cabin, her simple life, her grandmother's gentle teachings, all of it built on lies, on secrets meant to protect her. "Teach me," she said finally, meeting Theron's amber gaze. "Teach me everything." The king's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we start now, because based on these tracks, we have company arriving in less than an hour, and this time they won't be circling back." He raised his voice, addressing his warriors. "Combat Formation Delta. Protect the Bridgewalker at all costs. If the Coalition wants war, we'll give them a demonstration they'll never forget." As the warriors moved into position with lethal efficiency, Theron turned back to Aria one last time. "Stay close to me," he said. "And whatever happens, don't use your powers unless I tell you to. You're not trained, not ready. If you channel energy without control, you could kill yourself. Or worse, you could kill everyone around you." "Worse than dying? For a Bridgewalker?" "Yes, because if you lose control, you don't just die. You take every lycanthrope within 100 yards with you." The weight of that knowledge settled over Aria like a shroud. She wasn't just a person anymore. She was a weapon, and everyone, both friend and foe, would treat her accordingly. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the forest. The hunters were coming, and Aria Thornwood's old life burned to ash behind her. The hunters never came. For 3 hours, Theron's warriors held their defensive formation, weapons ready, senses extended into the forest. But the footsteps Aria had heard, that they'd all heard, simply stopped. Whoever had been approaching had either detected the ambush or been called back. "They're playing a longer game," Matthias muttered, his scarred face twisted with frustration. "Testing our responses, our numbers." Theron stood like a statue at the center of the formation, his eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. Aria had learned in the past hours that this was how he extended his senses, using some ability she didn't understand to feel the forest itself, searching for threats his eyes couldn't see. Finally, he opened his eyes. "They're gone," pulled back to regroup. He looked at Matthias. "Which means they're bringing reinforcements. We need to move. Now." The army mobilized with practiced efficiency, and once again Aria found herself swept along in their midst. But this time, exhaustion was beginning to set in. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, and her legs felt like lead. She stumbled over a root hidden beneath the snow, and before she could fall, Theron's hand caught her elbow. "You need rest," he said, studying her face with concern. "I'm fine. You're shaking. Your pupils are dilated, and I can hear your heart stuttering." He raised his voice slightly. "Matthias, we stop at the Waystone. The Bridgewalker needs food and rest before we push for the fortress." "My lord, that's only another hour, and she'll collapse before we make it halfway." Theron's tone brooked no argument. 20 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Matthias sighed but nodded, and the command rippled through the warriors. They changed direction slightly, heading toward what Aria assumed was this waystone. She wanted to protest, to insist she could keep going, but the truth was, Theron was right. Her vision had started to blur at the edges, and her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Whatever energy had sustained her earlier had burned out, leaving her hollowed and weak. "I'm slowing you down," she said quietly. "You're human," Theron replied. "Or mostly human. Your body isn't built for this kind of sustained effort." His hand remained on her elbow, steadying her. "The fact that you've made it this far is remarkable. Most humans would have collapsed hours ago. Because of this bridge-walker thing? Yes, your body is trying to adapt, to channel the ambient energy around you. But without training, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. You're getting enough to keep moving, but it's burning you out from the inside." Aria processed this information as they walked. Around them, the forest continued to grow denser, the trees older and more massive. Some of the trunks were so wide that it would take 6 people holding hands to circle them. And there was something about the quality of light here. It seemed to shimmer, as if the air itself was alive. "How old is this forest?" she asked. "Older than human civilization," Theron answered. "Some of these trees were already ancient when the first humans learned to make fire. This is primordial land, untouched by your kind's progress." There was something in his tone, not quite bitterness, but close. "You don't like humans much, do you?" "I don't like what humans do. There's a difference." He glanced at her. "Your kind spreads like a plague, consuming everything in your path. Forests fall, rivers are poisoned, and anything that doesn't serve your immediate needs is destroyed or driven out. That's not fair, isn't it?" Theron's amber eyes blazed. "In the last century alone, human expansion has cost my people 3 entire territories. Hundreds of thousands of acres of ancient forest, gone, turned into farms and cities and parking lots." His jaw clenched. "We've been pushed back, until there's almost nowhere left to go. And still they come, with their guns and their poison and their absolute certainty that they have the right to take whatever they want." Aria had no response to that, because he was right. She'd seen it herself in the small town near her cabin, the logging operations, the mining surveys, the constant push to develop and expand. "My grandmother used to say humanity had forgotten how to coexist," she said quietly, "that we'd lost the knowledge of how to share the world with other forms of consciousness." Theron's expression softened slightly. "Your grandmother was wiser than most. The Thornwood Bridgewalkers understood what so many have forgotten, that this world belongs to all of us, not just to those with the power to take it by force." They emerged into a clearing dominated by a massive stone formation, a natural pillar of gray rock that stood at least 30 feet high, covered in moss and lichen. Strange symbols had been carved into its surface, so worn by time that they were barely visible. "The Waystone," Theron announced. "One of the oldest markers in the Shadow Forest. It's been here for, well, no one really knows how long." The warriors immediately began setting up a temporary camp, some unpacking food supplies, others establishing a perimeter, still others tending to weapons and equipment. It was like watching a well-choreographed performance. Lyra appeared with a water skin and what looked like dried meat wrapped in leaves. "You need to eat," she said gently, pressing them into Aria's hands. "Your body is consuming energy faster than you can replace it." The water was shockingly cold and tasted of minerals and something else, something that made Aria's enhanced senses tingle. The meat was gamey but filling, and she realized she hadn't eaten since the soup in her cabin, a lifetime ago. "What is this water?" she asked between bites. "Spring water from deep in our territory," Lyra explained. "It's touched by the old magic, the energy that flows through these lands. For humans, it would just taste strange, but for you," she gestured at Aria's hands, which had stopped trembling, "it helps stabilize your power." Aria looked at the water skin with new respect. "Everything here is so different, so alive." "That's because it is alive." Theron had approached without Aria noticing, moving with that unsettling silence all lycanthropes seem to possess. The Shadow Forest isn't just trees and dirt. It's a living entity in its own right, connected to those of us who've sworn to protect it. We feel its pain when it's damaged, sense its moods, draw strength from its vitality. He sat down on a fallen log near where Aria stood, and for the first time, she saw him look almost tired. Not physically exhausted, but weary in a way that went deeper than the body. "How long have you been king?" The question escaped before Aria could stop it. Theron was quiet for a long moment. 107 years. Aria nearly choked on her water. 100? You're over 100 years old? I'm 234, to be precise. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Lycanthropes age differently than humans. We reach maturity in our early 20s and then slow down. Some of us can live for 5 or 6 centuries if we're lucky and careful. The implications of that were staggering. So everyone here varies wildly. Lyra and Kale are genuinely young, 16 and 17 respectively. Matthias is 112. Raven is 68. The warriors you see range from 20 to over 300 years old. Aria tried to process this. And you've been leading them for over a century. Not by choice, initially. Theron's expression darkened. I inherited the crown when my father was killed by human hunters. I was 27, barely more than a child by our standards, thrust into leadership during what was arguably the bloodiest period of the human-lycanthrope conflict. There was a story there, a painful one. Aria could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, how his hands clenched. "What happened?" she asked softly. Theron looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, as if he were making a decision about how much to trust her. Finally, he spoke. "My father was a peacemaker. Like your grandmother's ancestors, he believed in coexistence, in finding ways for humans and lycanthropes to share the world. He'd been working secretly with human leaders, trying to establish protected territories, treaties that would prevent further bloodshed." His voice went hollow. But there were those on both sides who didn't want peace, who profited from the conflict, who enjoyed the power it gave them. They betrayed him, Aria guessed. Worse. They used his own peace negotiations as a trap, promised a summit, a chance to finally end the war. My father went with a small escort, trusting in the honor of those he'd been negotiating with. Theron's hands were white-knuckled now. It was an ambush. They'd brought hunters, specialists trained to kill lycanthropes, silver weapons, poisoned blades, everything designed to inflict maximum suffering. "Oh God," Aria whispered. "My father died buying time for his escort to escape. Only 3 of them made it back to tell us what happened. I was crowned king the same day I buried what was left of my father's body." His amber eyes met hers, and they were full of old pain that had never quite healed. "I swore that day that I would never trust humans again, that I would protect my people at any cost, even if it meant war without end. But you didn't," Aria said. "Start a war, I mean. You've been holding the border, defending, but not attacking. Because my father's last words to me were, 'Don't let hatred rule you.'" Theron's voice broke slightly. "He died believing in peace, even as humans murdered him for it. And I've spent 100 years trying to honor that, trying to be the leader he wanted me to be, while also keeping my people safe from those who would see us extinct." Aria understood then what she saw in Theron's eyes. Not just pain, but the crushing weight of impossible choices, of trying to balance honor and survival, hope and pragmatism. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. For what happened to your father. For all of it." Theron looked at her with surprise. "You're apologizing for something you had no part in?" "I'm apologizing because someone should. Because what happened to him, to all of you, was wrong." Aria met his gaze steadily. "And because I'm starting to understand what my grandmother was trying to teach me. That healing isn't just about treating wounds. It's about acknowledging pain, witnessing suffering, and refusing to let it be forgotten or dismissed." Something shifted in Theron's expression, the walls he'd built around himself cracking just slightly. "Your grandmother taught you well." Before Aria could respond, Matthias approached. "My lord." The scouts report movement again. Different group, coming from the southwest. "They're not trying to hide. It's a diplomatic party flying approach banners." Theron was on his feet instantly. The vulnerable man replaced by the tactical king. "How many?" 12. Standard embassy formation. Matthias's scarred face was grim. "They're flying the Volkov crest. The name sent a ripple through the nearby warriors. Aria saw hands moving to weapons, stances shifting to combat readiness. Marcus Volkov, Theron said, his voice gone cold. Interesting timing. You think he's behind the coalition movements? Matthias asked. I think Marcus doesn't do anything without 3 backup plans and a profit motive. Theron turned to his warriors. Defensive formation, but honor the diplomatic approach. No one makes a move unless I give the order. He looked at Aria. Stay close to Lyra and Kyle. If this goes badly— I know, Aria interrupted. Don't use my power unless you tell me to. Good. He started to walk away, then paused. And Aria? Marcus Volkov is dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with physical strength. He'll try to read you, manipulate you, find your weaknesses. Don't give him anything to work with. The approaching party emerged from the tree line exactly as Matthias had described. 12 lycanthropes in formal dress, carrying banners that showed a silver wolf's head against a black field. At their center walked a man who could only be Marcus Volkov. He was striking rather than handsome, with sharp features and pale gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. His hair was silver blonde, pulled back in a style that was almost aristocratic, and he moved with the languid confidence of someone who'd never once doubted his right to take up space in the world. King Theron, he called out, his voice smooth as silk. What an unexpected pleasure to find you so far from the fortress. Out for a morning stroll with your entire army? Lord Volkov, Theron replied, his tone carefully neutral. I wasn't aware the southwestern territories had adopted new diplomatic protocols. The old ones required advance notice before crossing into sovereign territory. Marcus smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Forgive the breach of etiquette. When I heard rumors of coalition movements near the border, I thought it prudent to investigate personally. Imagine my surprise to find you here, guarding— what exactly? His pale eyes swept over the assembled warriors and landed on Aria with the precision of a predator identifying prey. Well, he said softly, this is interesting. Theron moved slightly, positioning himself between Marcus and Aria. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable. A claim and a warning. The coalition is your concern now? Theron asked. I wasn't aware you'd taken such an interest in human affairs. I take an interest in anything that threatens the stability of our kind. Marcus's eyes never left Aria. And rumor has it that something very significant was discovered in the outer territories. Something that could shift the balance of power considerably. Rumors are often wrong, but sometimes they're not. Marcus tilted his head, studying Aria with unnerving intensity. She smells like moonshade and old magic. And unless I'm very much mistaken, she has the Thornwood look, that particular bone structure, the eye color. Tell me, King Theron, have you found yourself a genuine bridgewalker? I thought they were all extinct. The tension ratcheted up immediately. Every warrior in Theron's company went still, hands on weapons. What Miss Thornwood is or isn't is none of your concern, Theron said quietly. Oh, but it is. Marcus finally looked away from Aria to meet Theron's gaze. The old treaties, the ones established by the Bridgewalkers, those are still technically binding, which means if a genuine Thornwood heir has surfaced, she has authority over territorial disputes. She could redraw boundaries, redistribute lands, even strip a sitting king of his crown if she chose to invoke the ancient protocols. Aria felt the weight of multiple gazes turned toward her. This was news. Dangerous news that changed everything. The old treaties have been defunct for a century, Matthias said. No one honors them anymore. But they've never been officially dissolved, Marcus countered. Which means legally, technically, they're still valid. All it would take is a bridgewalker willing to invoke them. His smile widened. Imagine the chaos. Every territorial line redrawn, every ancient grievance reopened. It would be the perfect opportunity for someone ambitious to expand their holdings significantly, or for someone reckless to start a war that would destroy us all, Theron shot back. Perspective, my dear king. It's all about perspective. Aria had heard enough. She stepped forward, ignoring Theron's warning hand. I don't know anything about old treaties or territorial disputes, she said firmly. I'm a healer, not a politician. Whatever power I might have, I'm not interested in using it to help anyone's ambition. Marcus's pale eyes locked onto hers, and Aria felt a jolt of something, Not attraction, but recognition. This man was dangerous, not because of physical strength, but because of the calculating intelligence behind those eyes. How refreshingly naive, he said, but also irrelevant. Power doesn't care about your intentions, Miss Thornwood. It simply is. And others will use you for their purposes whether you cooperate or not. Is that a threat? Theron's voice had gone deadly soft. It's a statement of fact. Marcus gestured to his escort, and they began to withdraw. I came here to verify a rumor, and you've confirmed it spectacularly. Thank you for that. As for the rest, well, I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other very soon. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and King Theron? You should know that the Coalition isn't the only group searching for bridgewalkers. There are others. Older organizations, more patient hunters, who've been waiting a very long time for a Thornwood heir to surface. Your little army won't be enough to protect her when they come calling. With that ominous warning, Marcus Volkov and his escort disappeared back into the forest as silently as they'd come. The moment they were out of sight, Theron spun to face Matthias. Double the perimeter. I want scouts tracking that party, and I want to know the instant they cross back into Volkov territory. If Marcus so much as breathes wrong, I want to know about it. Yes, my lord. Matthias began barking orders, and warriors scattered to obey. Theron turned to Aria, his expression thunderous. When I tell you to stay back, you stay back. He was talking about me, Aria protested. I had a right to... You had a right to nothing. The words came out harder than Theron probably intended, and he visibly forced himself to take a breath. You don't understand what you just did. By speaking to Marcus directly, you confirmed his suspicions and gave him information about your personality, your values, your weaknesses. My weakness being that I don't want to be used as a pawn in someone else's power games. Your weakness being that you care about doing the right thing, Theron corrected. Marcus will use that. He'll engineer situations where you have to choose between your principles and survival, and he'll exploit every choice you make. Aria wanted to argue, but the fear in Theron's eyes stopped her. This wasn't anger at her defiance. It was terror at her vulnerability. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to make things worse. Theron's expression softened. You didn't know, but you need to learn, and quickly, because Marcus wasn't lying. If word has reached him, it's reached others. And some of them. He trailed off, shaking his head. We need to get you to the fortress. Now. No more stops. No more delays. The march resumed. Faster and more urgent than before. Aria's exhaustion had faded slightly thanks to the magical spring water, but her mind was reeling from everything she'd learned. Ancient treaties, political power, organizations hunting bridgewalkers. She was in far deeper than she'd realized. They traveled for another 3 hours, moving deeper into the shadow forest. The trees here were ancient beyond measure, their trunks twisted into impossible shapes, their branches forming a canopy so thick that the ground below existed in perpetual twilight. And then, suddenly, they emerged from the tree line, and Aria saw the fortress. It wasn't a building. It was a piece of the landscape itself, stone and wood grown together over centuries, creating a structure that seemed to have erupted from the earth rather than been built upon it. Walls of living trees woven with granite, towers that spiraled up into the canopy, bridges suspended between massive trunks. It was organic and architectural simultaneously, wildly beautiful and deeply unsettling. Welcome to Shadow Peak Fortress, Theron said. The heart of my kingdom, the only place in this world where you might actually be safe. Gates opened as they approached. Massive things made of ironwood and reinforced with silver inlay. Warriors lined the walls, and Aria could feel their eyes on her, curious and assessing. Inside the walls, the fortress was a small city unto itself, stone buildings nestled between ancient trees, training grounds where lycanthropes sparred in both human and wolf form, gardens growing plants Aria had never seen before. People, hundreds of them, going about their daily lives while still maintaining an alertness that spoke of constant vigilance. Children ran past, playing some game that involved mock combat. Elders sat in conversation circles, their voices rising and falling in a language that wasn't quite English. Everywhere Aria looked, she saw life, community, a society that had endured against incredible odds. I had no idea, she breathed. I don't know what I thought, but not this. Not something so alive. Did you think we all lived in caves? Lyra asked with gentle humor. We're not animals, Aria. We're people. We just happen to be able to change shape. Theron led them through winding streets toward the central structure, a massive hall built into and around the largest tree Aria had ever seen. The trunk had to be at least 100 feet in diameter, and the building spiraled up it like a vine. This is the King's Hall, Theron explained. My home, but also the administrative center of our government. I've already sent word ahead. The council will be assembling to discuss the situation. You'll be given quarters, a chance to rest and clean up. But Aria, he stopped, turning to face her fully. The council will want to meet you. They'll have questions, and some of them won't be kind. These are people who've spent their entire lives watching humans destroy our world. To them, you represent either salvation or another threat. I can protect you from external enemies, but I can't control how my own people react to you. I understand, Aria said, though she wasn't sure she fully did. A woman appeared, tall and elegant, with silver hair despite appearing no older than 40. She wore robes of deep green embroidered with silver thread, and carried herself with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Theron, she said, her voice warm but concerned. I received your message. A bridgewalker? Truly? Truly, Celine. Theron gestured to Aria. This is Aria Thornwood, granddaughter of Helena Thornwood, last of the bridgewalker line. Aria, this is Selena Ravenswood, my chief advisor and oldest friend. Celine studied Aria with keen gray eyes that seemed to see past skin and bone to something deeper. Remarkable. I can feel the power in her, untrained and wild, but definitely there. She looked at Theron. This changes everything. I know. Marcus Volkov knows? He does now. He intercepted us on the way here. Celine's expression darkened. Then we have less time than I'd hoped. The council needs to convene immediately, and we need to decide what to do about the coalition, the Volkov situation, and— She paused, glancing at Aria. Other complications. What other complications? Aria asked. Celine and Theron exchanged a look that made Aria's stomach sink. Tell her, Theron said quietly. Celine sighed. There's a prophecy, an old one, recorded by the bridgewalkers themselves before they vanished. It speaks of a time when the last Thornwood heir would emerge during the greatest crisis our people had ever faced, that her power would either unite the fractured packs and bring peace, or destroy everything in a cataclysm that would end both human and lycanthrope civilization. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. So I'm either a savior or an apocalypse, Aria said numbly. Great. No pressure. Prophecies are tricky things, Theron said. They're not fixed futures, just possible ones. The choices you make, the path you choose, those determine which version becomes reality. And how am I supposed to make the right choices when I don't even understand what I am? That's what I'm here for, Celine said. I'm one of the few living lycanthropes who studied under a bridgewalker. Your great-aunt, actually, before she died. I can teach you to control your power, to understand what you're capable of, but it won't be easy, and it won't be fast. Bridgewalker training traditionally took years. We don't have years, Theron interjected. We have days, maybe weeks before every faction in this conflict descends on us trying to either claim or kill her. Then we'd better work fast. Celine turned to Aria. Are you willing? To learn? To fight? To potentially sacrifice everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world? Aria thought of her quiet cabin, her simple life, her grandmother's gentle wisdom. All of it was gone now, burned away by the revelation of who and what she really was. But she also thought of Theron's father, dying for the hope of peace, of Lyra and Kale, almost dead in a snowstorm because humans and lycanthropes couldn't coexist, of centuries of bloodshed and suffering that might finally end, or might explode into something even worse. I'm willing, she said. Celine smiled. Then we begin at dawn, but for now, rest. You'll need your strength for what's coming. She led Aria away, up winding stairs built into the massive tree, to a room that was surprisingly comfortable. A bed, a desk, windows that looked out over the forest canopy. Simple, but peaceful. "I'll have food and fresh clothes sent up," Selena said. "The bathing room is through that door. Take your time, settle in. Tomorrow, your real education begins." After she left, Aria stood at the window, looking out at the impossible forest, the alien world she'd stumbled into. Somewhere out there, enemies were gathering. Marcus Volkov was scheming, the coalition was hunting, and she was at the center of it all. A power she didn't understand wrapped in skin that felt increasingly foreign. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called. Theron entered, and Aria noticed he'd changed clothes, from travel-stained leather to what she assumed was formal attire. He looked both more regal and somehow more vulnerable. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "Make sure you had everything you needed." "I'm fine, or as fine as anyone can be after learning they're a prophesied apocalypse." A ghost of a smile crossed Theron's face. "You're handling this better than I expected." "I'm good at adapting. It's a survival skill when you grow up alone." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, and Aria felt the strange pull between them, that electric connection that sparked every time they were close. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course. Earlier, when you touched me, you said you felt peace. What did you mean?" Theron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "For as long as I can remember, I've been at war. With humans, with rival packs, with the constant pressure of leadership. My mind is always racing, always planning the next move, anticipating the next threat. It's exhausting, but I've never known anything else." He stepped closer. "But when I touch you, when I'm near you, it's like all that noise quiets. Just for a moment, I remember what it feels like to simply exist without the weight of a crown, without the responsibility of thousands of lives depending on my decisions." "That sounds like a burden," Aria said softly. "It is, but it's also a gift, because it reminds me that there's more to life than survival and strategy, that somewhere beneath the king, there's still just Theron, a man who's forgotten what it means to want something for himself instead of for his people." Aria's breath caught. "And what do you want?" Theron reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. "Things I shouldn't. Things that would complicate an already impossible situation. Maybe complications aren't always bad. They are when people die because of them." He dropped his hand and stepped back, the moment broken. "Get some rest, Aria. Tomorrow starts your training, and Celine isn't known for being gentle with students." He turned to leave, and Aria felt the loss of his presence like a physical ache. "Theron?" He paused at the door. "Thank you, for protecting me, for all of it." He looked back at her, and his amber eyes were full of things he couldn't or wouldn't say. "Ask me to stop and I will. Ask me to send you back to your cabin, to your old life, and I'll provide guards to keep you safe from a distance. This path you're on, it only gets harder from here." Aria met his gaze steadily. "I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to teach me how to fight." Something like pride flickered across Theron's face. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." After he left, Aria collapsed onto the bed, her mind racing with everything that had happened in less than 24 hours. She'd gone from isolated healer to prophesied weapon, from simple human to something she didn't understand, from alone to surrounded by warriors who saw her as either salvation or doom. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, she'd started to fall for a king who was 200 years old and carried the weight of an entire civilization on his shoulders. Her life had become impossible, but as Aria finally drifted off to sleep, wrapped in soft furs in a room built into a living tree, she realized something surprising. She wouldn't change it. Not if going back meant never meeting Theron. Not if safety meant losing this strange, terrifying, beautiful world she'd discovered. Tomorrow, she would begin to learn what she truly was. Tonight, she would rest in the eye of the storm, and when the battle finally came, and it would come, she would be ready. Or at least, she would try to be, because the alternative was unthinkable. Aria woke to chaos. Alarms rang through the fortress, deep, resonant bells that made her bones vibrate. She stumbled to the window, and her blood ran cold. The forest below swarmed with figures, Hundreds of them. The coalition had come, and they'd brought an army. The door burst open. Theron stood there, already in battle armor, his eyes blazing amber. They're attacking now, before you can be trained. Before you can control your power. He grabbed her hand. I need you to trust me. Completely. What's happening? Marcus sold you out to the coalition, told them exactly where you were. They're not here to capture you, Aria. They're here to kill you before you can unite the packs against them. An explosion rocked the fortress. Screams echoed from below. Theron pulled her through winding corridors toward the Great Hall. Selene was there, along with Matthias and the senior warriors. A tactical map showed red markers surrounding the fortress from all sides. We can't hold them off indefinitely, Matthias reported grimly. They have silver weapons, explosives. They came prepared to breach our defenses. Then we don't give them time. Theron turned to Aria. There's a ritual, an ancient one that the Bridgewalkers used to create the original treaties. It requires enormous power, but if successful, it binds all lycanthropes within range to honor peace. They physically can't attack humans or each other. But she's untrained, Selene protested. The ritual could kill her, or save everyone, Aria interrupted. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Tell me what to do. Theron's expression was anguished. I can't ask this of you. You're not asking. I'm choosing. Another explosion. Closer now. The walls trembled. The ritual requires a sacrifice, Selena said quietly. Not death, but transformation. You'll no longer be human, Aria. You'll become something between worlds. A true Bridgewalker. You'll be bound to the treaty you create, tasked with maintaining balance for the rest of your very long life. How long? Bridgewalkers are functionally immortal. As long as the treaty holds, you endure. Aria looked at Theron, at his warriors, at Lyra and Kale standing ready to fight, at this world that had terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. I'll do it. They moved to the ritual chamber at the heart of the great tree. Ancient symbols covered the floor, glowing faintly with power. Theron positioned Aria at the center while Selene began the incantation in a language that sounded like wind and thunder. There's something you should know, Theron said, kneeling beside her. The ritual requires a tether, someone to anchor you while you channel that much power. It creates a permanent bond. What kind of bond? The kind that links two souls together, forever. His amber eyes searched hers. I'm volunteering to be your tether, but that means wherever you go, I'll feel you. Whatever you experience, I'll share. We'll be connected in ways that transcend. Yes, Aria interrupted. I choose you. Something broke in Theron's carefully controlled expression. You don't know what you're agreeing to. I know enough. Aria took his hand. I've known since you first touched me that this was inevitable. Whatever this is between us, it's stronger than logic or timing or circumstance. So yes, Theron, tether me. Bind yourself to me. I want you there when I do this. The walls shook violently. Voices shouted outside. The enemy had breached the outer defenses. Now, Selene commanded. Theron gripped Aria's hands as Selene completed the incantation. Power erupted through Aria like lightning, burning through her veins, rewriting her very cells. She screamed, but Theron held her steady, his own power flowing into her, stabilizing the maelstrom. Images flashed through her mind. Centuries of conflict, rivers of blood, endless suffering, but also moments of beauty, of love between species, of the world as it could be. She understood finally what she had to do. Aria released the power in a wave that exploded outward, washing over the fortress, the forest, expanding in all directions. Everywhere it touched, weapons fell from hands. Rage dissolved into confusion. The compulsion to violence simply stopped. In the sudden silence, Aria collapsed. She woke in Theron's arms, his face above hers etched with concern and something deeper. Did it work? She whispered. See for yourself. He helped her to the window. Below, hundreds of humans and lycanthropes stood mixed together, weapons abandoned, staring at each other with bewilderment. The treaty had taken hold. They couldn't fight even if they wanted to. The coalition leaders are demanding to speak with you, Theron said. As is Marcus Volkov, as are representatives from a dozen other factions. You've just rewritten the rules of this world, Aria Thornwood. She could feel it now. the power humming through her, no longer wild, but controlled. And beneath it, a golden thread connecting her to Theron, their souls intertwined. "What happens now?" she asked. Theron smiled, genuinely smiled, for perhaps the first time since they'd met. "Now you become what you were always meant to be, a bridge between worlds, a peacekeeper, a force that terrifies politicians on both sides because you can't be controlled or manipulated. And you? I'm bound to you now. Where you go, I follow. What you build, I help protect." His hand cupped her cheek. "If you'll have me." Aria leaned into his touch, feeling the rightness of it singing through their bond. "I don't think I have a choice. I'm pretty sure I started falling for you the moment you showed up with an army at my door. That's not romantic at all. Neither is abducting someone. We'll work on it." Theron laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, and pulled her close. Epilogue. 6 months later, Aria stood at her cabin door, restored now, a neutral meeting ground between territories. Representatives from both sides came weekly for peace councils. The work was hard, the politics exhausting, but slowly, painfully, the world was changing. Footsteps crunched through snow. Theron emerged from the forest, returning from patrol with Lyra and Kyle. They'd become her constant shadows, her family. "Coffee's ready," she called. Theron climbed the steps and pulled her into his arms, the bond between them singing with contentment. "Have I mentioned today that I love you? Not since breakfast. Unacceptable. I love you, Aria Thornwood. My bridgewalker, my tether, my impossible gift." She kissed him, tasting forever in that touch. 2 lost wolves had scratched at her door seeking shelter. A king had arrived with an army, and Aria had found her destiny in the space between worlds, in the heart of a man who'd waited 2 centuries for peace. The treaty held. The world turned. And somewhere in the shadow forest, new moonshade bloomed.